Ever tried navigating a city where streets are suddenly dead-ended, alleyways twist like a puzzle, and finding a grocery store or a park turns into a scavenger hunt? Life in these spaces is unpredictable, messy, and exhausting. Buildings pop up wherever there's space, and sometimes it feels like the city is growing faster than anyone can keep up. Sounds chaotic, right? Some cities were never really planned, they just happened. Here's how they turned out. The first thing you notice in an unplanned city is often its streets. They twist, turn, and sometimes just stop without warning, leaving anyone trying to navigate them utterly bewildered. Unlike cities designed with a clear blueprint, where every avenue, street, and alleyway has a purpose, unplanned cities grow like living organisms, sprawling wherever there's space. Imagine trying to get to work during rush hour. Instead of a predictable commute, you find yourself stuck in a jam on roads barely wide enough for one car in each direction. Delivery trucks squeeze past motorcycles, while pedestrians weave around potholes and street vendors, their baskets spilling into the lane. Horns blare constantly, tempers flare, and even the shortest trip can take hours. Every journey feels like a gamble, testing both patience and ingenuity. Take, for example, some of the older neighborhoods in cities like Dhaka, Bangladesh, or Lagos, Nigeria. In these spaces, a single road can twist through residential areas, cross over informal markets, and merge unpredictably with industrial zones. There are no traffic signals or key intersections, no proper sidewalks for pedestrians, and narrow alleys that suddenly open up into crowded marketplaces. Residents often invent their own rules where motorbikes whiz between cars, carts squeeze into gaps, and vendors call out, trying to keep their businesses alive amidst the chaos. For someone living here daily, navigating the city becomes second nature. For newcomers or visitors, it's like stepping into a live maze with constantly shifting walls. Housing in these cities tells a similar story. Without a planned framework for residential zones, homes pop up wherever there's space, often without adherence to safety codes or zoning laws. Sometimes they cling to steep hillsides, teetering precariously over ravines. Other times, they sit wedged between factories or along heavily trafficked roads. Overcrowding is the norm. Families share cramped apartments, often stacked on top of one another in makeshift multi-story constructions. You might see narrow stairways barely wide enough for one person, communal kitchens that serve multiple households, and rooftops converted into sleeping areas. The sense of community can be strong, but privacy is scarce, and the lack of proper planning can create unsafe living conditions. Informal settlements, also called slums in some contexts, are often the most extreme examples of this phenomenon. As cities expand faster than governments can provide housing, residents build wherever land is available. In Mumbai, India, for instance, the Dharavi slum houses hundreds of thousands of people in tightly packed buildings, many constructed without formal approvals. Despite the incredible human spirit, ingenuity, and enterprise evident there, the environment is crowded, sanitation is poor, and public infrastructure is minimal. Life here is vibrant but perpetually precarious, showing both the resilience of communities and the challenges of living without urban planning. Sanitation is another silent but massive challenge in these unplanned areas. Cities without planners rarely have drainage or sewage systems that can keep pace with the population. During the rainy season, streets can transform into rivers of muddy water, seeping garbage along with them and sometimes flooding homes. Waste collection is patchy or non-existent, forcing residents to improvise. You will often see garbage piled along streets, waiting for collection trucks that may come sporadically, if at all. Some create informal solutions, covering drains with sandbags to prevent flooding, digging makeshift channels to redirect water, or establishing small-scale recycling programs. These efforts are admirable, but they are stopgaps rather than real solutions. Without proper planning, sanitation becomes an ongoing struggle that affects health, productivity, and quality of life. Healthcare and education also suffer when cities grow without planners. Schools, hospitals, and clinics are scattered irregularly, often concentrated in wealthier neighborhoods, while poorer areas are left with little access. A parent may have to walk miles just to reach a school, or a patient might need to travel through traffic-choked streets to find a functioning hospital. The uneven distribution of essential services forces residents to spend extra time commuting, pay higher transportation costs, and navigate bureaucracies that were never designed to serve everyone efficiently. In a planned city, every neighborhood would have access to these basics, but in an unplanned one, convenience is often a privilege rather than a right. The environment also bears the brunt of unplanned growth. Trees are cut down to make way for buildings, wetlands are drained, and rivers or canals are polluted by runoff from nearby homes and industries. Parks, if they exist, are rare gems, often far from where most people live. Urban sprawl encroaches on farmland, forests, and other ecosystems, fragmenting habitats and reducing biodiversity. In places like Jakarta, Indonesia, unchecked urban growth has contributed to frequent flooding, water pollution, and the destruction of mangrove forests that once protected the coastline. Residents experience hotter summers due to heat islands, harsher winters, and increasing vulnerability to storms and natural disasters. The city itself becomes a reminder that human expansion, when unplanned, comes at the expense of nature. Safety, too, becomes a hidden concern in unplanned cities. Roads without proper design, narrow alleys crammed with homes, and dense populations all increase accident and disaster risks. Fire can spread quickly in informal settlements, and emergency services often struggle to reach affected areas. Earthquakes, floods, or storms pose greater danger because buildings are constructed haphazardly and without adherence to safety standards. Residents adapt, creating shortcuts, warning systems, or communal rules, but these are temporary fixes, not long-term solutions. The underlying risk is constant, shaping daily life in ways that outsiders rarely notice. Moreover, transportation inefficiencies add yet another layer of struggle. In planned cities, buses, trains, and roads are designed to complement each other. In unplanned cities, transport becomes a patchwork. Minibuses, shared taxis, and motorbikes operate independently, often duplicating routes or creating confusing networks. Commuters develop a sixth sense for finding the fastest routes, but newcomers are often lost. Roads that could be widened or optimized remain narrow because the city evolved incrementally rather than systematically. The result? Traffic jams, delayed deliveries, and frustrated residents, all of which clearly affects the local economy. Yet, despite all these challenges, there's a certain vibrancy and resilience in unplanned cities. Informal markets thrive, street vendors create microeconomies, and communities develop social bonds that can be stronger than those in planned areas. Residents innovate constantly, whether it's building makeshift bridges over flooded streets, forming neighborhood watch groups, or creating small local schools. The city may be chaotic, but it's alive in a way that feels tangible and raw. The human spirit shines in these environments, demonstrating both creativity and endurance. By now, you can start to picture the reality of a city without planners. Streets that confound, homes that crowd, sanitation that strains, services that are uneven, nature pushed aside, safety risks lurking, and transportation nightmares waiting at every corner. Life becomes a constant negotiation, a daily balancing act between creativity and survival. The city's disorder shapes the rhythms of life, the way people interact, and even the opportunities available to them. And yet, in the midst of all this disorder, people find ways to adapt, to survive, and sometimes even thrive. It's a city that grows on its own, but at a cost that's often tangible, persistent, and invisible to outsiders. Now, if you thought chaos of streets, overcrowded housing, poor sanitation, and uneven public services was enough to challenge a city, wait until you look deeper. The problems don't stop there. In fact, unplanned growth has an effect that touches nearly every aspect of life, from the way people move around to how the city interacts with nature, and even whether it can survive in the long term. These challenges might be less visible than tangled streets or overflowing garbage, but they're just as real, and in some cases even more consequential. Let's take a closer look. Transportation is one of the most obvious and daily frustrations in cities without planners. At first, it may seem like a minor inconvenience, but in reality, it can define the rhythm of life in the city. In planned cities, roads, bus routes, and rail systems are carefully designed to support each other. There's a logic to commuting, a predictable network that allows people to move efficiently. In unplanned cities, this coordination doesn't exist. Public transport is often a chaotic patchwork. Buses and minibuses crisscross neighborhoods in overlapping routes, sometimes competing for passengers rather than serving them efficiently. Taxis, rickshaws, or informal shared rides pop up wherever there's demand, creating even more congestion. Think of a typical morning in an unplanned city like Manila or Cairo. The sun rises over narrow streets already choked with traffic. Motorbikes weave between cars, trying to make up for lost time. Pedestrians dodge vehicles while hauling groceries or guiding children to school. Bus drivers honk impatiently, attempting to squeeze into spaces barely large enough for their vehicles. The commute that should take 20 minutes stretches into an hour or more. Businesses lose money as deliveries are delayed. Children arrive late to school. Even emergency services struggle. Ambulances may take 30 minutes longer than necessary to reach patients because streets were never designed to accommodate high-speed travel or heavy traffic. But the problem goes beyond commuting. Cities that grow without planning rarely think about transport hubs, parking, or pedestrian safety. Sidewalks are often non-existent, forcing people to walk on roads. Cyclists risk their lives navigating streets designed for cars. Major intersections, if they exist, lack traffic signals or proper signage. Residents develop their own workarounds, informal crossings, secret shortcuts, or traffic guides who wave vehicles through crowded streets. These solutions help at the moment, but do nothing to reduce systemic inefficiency. Over time, the congestion worsens, creating a feedback loop where the city grows, traffic increases, and mobility becomes even more stressful. The environmental consequences of unplanned urban growth are equally alarming. When cities expand haphazardly, nature rarely gets a say. Trees are cut down to make way for buildings, wetlands are drained, and rivers or canals are often turned into open sewers. Parks, if they exist at all, are scattered and insufficient for the population's needs. Imagine standing on a rooftop in an unplanned city during the summer. The concrete radiates heat, the air is thick with dust and exhaust fumes, and greenery is scarce. Urban heat islands form, making summers unbearable. Flooding becomes frequent because water has nowhere to go, seeping into streets and homes. Take Jakarta, Indonesia for an example. Its rapid, largely unplanned growth over decades has contributed to sinking land, severe flooding, and the destruction of mangrove forests that once protected the coastline. In other cities, informal settlements encroach on rivers or drainage canals, making floods worse. In Lagos, Nigeria, poor drainage and unplanned construction along waterways mean that even moderate rains can paralyze entire neighborhoods. Residents have to wade through knee-deep water to reach buses or markets, risking both health and property. Nature, it seems, becomes an adversary rather than a partner. Pollution compounds the problem. When industrial zones, residential areas, and commercial districts are mixed without planning, emissions and waste spread indiscriminately. Air quality drops, water supplies are contaminated, and soil is degraded. Noise pollution is constant. Construction, traffic, and street markets create a cacophony that never ends. In these cities, residents often develop coping mechanisms like staying indoors during peak traffic hours, avoiding certain neighborhoods, or relying on bottled water. But no matter the means they devise, these are merely survival strategies rather than solutions. The environment is under stress, and the consequences are felt in health problems and reduced life expectancy. Long-term sustainability, the final major consequence of unplanned growth, is perhaps the most insidious. Without a coherent urban plan, cities struggle to maintain infrastructure over time. Roads deteriorate faster, drainage systems fail, and public services cannot scale to meet population growth. Electricity and water supplies are often inconsistent because networks weren't designed to handle the density of people that eventually settle there. When a city grows in a patchwork, it becomes harder and costlier to retrofit proper systems later. Each year, governments spend more trying to catch up, and residents continue to bear the brunt of inefficiency. Take, for instance, the water supply in Dhaka. Rapid urban expansion has led to a situation where wells and municipal lines cannot keep up with demand. Informal connections, illegal taps, and over-extraction strain the system further. Residents in informal settlements often rely on hand pumps or water vendors, paying far more than those in well-planned areas for the same essential resource. Similar stories can be found in cities across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. In most cases, unplanned growth sets up a cascade of long-term issues that make the city harder to manage, more expensive to live in, and increasingly vulnerable to natural disasters. Even energy infrastructure is affected. Cities without planners often have uneven electricity distribution, with some neighborhoods experiencing frequent blackouts while others enjoy constant supply. Informal wiring, often unsafe, can lead to fires or accidents. Renewable energy adoption is nearly impossible to integrate systematically because there's no overarching framework to guide implementation. What begins as a minor inconvenience can eventually snowball into systemic inefficiency that hampers businesses, schools, and hospitals alike. Unplanned growth also affects social equity. When a city develops haphazardly, wealthier residents often occupy more desirable areas, while marginalized communities are pushed to flood-prone, polluted, or poorly serviced zones. Over time, this creates deep inequalities. Access to healthcare, education, and safe housing becomes a matter of geography rather than policy. Residents in underserved areas have fewer opportunities, face higher risks, and are more vulnerable to crises. Yet, despite all these challenges, the human spirit persists. In unplanned cities, creativity and community often flourish in unexpected ways. Residents invent new solutions to old problems, from informal ride-sharing networks to neighborhood cleanup initiatives. Small businesses thrive in street markets, and neighbors rely on each other for safety, childcare, and resources. Life is messy, but it's also vibrant. People adapt, communities innovate, and despite the inefficiencies, cities remain alive with energy. But these triumphs don't erase the fact that the challenges are systemic. Transportation inefficiencies, environmental degradation, and long-term sustainability issues continue to shape daily life, often creating invisible burdens that residents carry every day. Over time, the city's lack of planning can limit growth, reduce economic productivity, increase vulnerability to disasters, and amplify social inequalities. The effects of unplanned growth extend far beyond congested streets or overflowing garbage. They influence health, wealth, opportunity, and even life expectancy. In the end, cities without planners are fascinating case studies in human adaptation and resilience, but they're also cautionary tales. They show what can happen when urban growth is left entirely to chance. Streets become labyrinths, homes become crowded, public services lag, nature suffers, and long-term sustainability is jeopardized. Yet within that disorder, life persists. Markets are filled with the noise of activity, children play in narrow alleys, and communities find ways to survive. The lesson is clear. Planning is mostly about enabling cities to function, grow, and sustain the people who call them home. By now, you can picture the full spectrum of challenges. Residents adapt, but the city pays a constant price. Infrastructure, environment, safety, and social equity all suffer when growth is left to chance. And the truth is, these challenges are only going to get more intense as populations rise, climate impacts grow, and resources become scarcer. People thrive against the odds, communities form in impossible spaces, and life goes on. But behind that energy is a city constantly struggling to catch up with itself. Cities that ignore planning do so at their own peril. While they may survive, they rarely thrive in the way they could if vision, foresight, and design had guided their growth from the beginning.